Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, boys and girls, as we sit here on the brink of the TIFF sanity, it would behoove me to remind you that if you are within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where I sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And, you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do. Subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Gives you a 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere. Places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive all of our episodes over at our In the Seat YouTube channel. So please do us that kindness and give us a like and subscribe there as well. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, we're on the Instagram, we're on the Letterboxd, we're on the TikTok, and, well, hell, we're probably a few other places too. At where else? At In the Seats, for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So do us that kindness and pay us a visit. Boys and girls, I don't have much to say leading up to this one. We are on the brink of the Toronto International Film Festival. It is TIFF 2023, and we are going to break it down high above the streets of Toronto, thanks to our friends from Elevation Pictures, with 3 colleagues, 3 friends, 3 of the smartest guys I've ever had the chance to sit in front of a microphone with. So, enough of my yammering. If you're heading out to TIFF this coming September 7th through the 17th here in the city of Toronto, listen to this podcast, check it out, and enjoy, and we'll see you at the movies.
It is like swimming in the deep end when you have the full list in front of you.
Cannonball.
Yeah.
And speaking of the deep end, we're out in the wild blue yonder, in case you can't tell by the sound of my voice, but we're here talking about the upcoming edition of the Toronto International Film Festival. What is it, guys? Number 48?
48.
50's
Wow.
coming up soon.
Oh my God.
What are they gonna do?
TIFF's getting old.
The
but
Judge too.
TIFF is getting old, but I mean, we love it. So we're here to talk about movies galore and all that other stuff. But as always, you know me as Dave Voigt, the host and venerable voice of this podcast. But before we get started, I do have to introduce our guests and our panel. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to use some mildly outdated wrestling references to introduce our panel, if only because it will amuse me and amuse my guests. But first off, I would like to remind everyone that this podcast is officially sponsored by the Elevation Pictures release of Golda, starring Helen Mirren as the story of Golda Meir and her turbulent turn and rise as Israeli Prime Minister. It is in theaters now, but let's get down to business. And as the quote-unquote wise man of these proceedings, first off, I have to introduce someone who, well, needs to be acknowledged. He is the reigning undisputed host of Cinema Scene for more years than I could possibly count, and he's also one half of the dynamic duo of the Untitled Movie Podcast. Stand up, acknowledge him. He is Mr. Eric Marchen. Eric, how you doing today, brother?
Dave, I'm doing well. I'm hoping to perform a heel turn during this show.
Our cinema chief.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
Well, every tribal chief needs a right-hand man, and as we said before, this man, he said he was one half of the Untitled Movie Podcast. We need to have the other half of the Untitled Movie Podcast here. He is the right-hand man. He is main event Matt Rorabeck. How you doing today, sir?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good, brother, man. Thanks for the time. And just
Can I ask you a question?
Shoot.
How did you afford both of us?
I thought you were a package deal, so I mean.
Well, that doesn't work like that.
Oh, I'm getting a separate bill. All right.
You kept costs low by bringing me in. It evens out.
Well, and that last voice you heard, man, he was. Well, some could call him honorary, but now I dare say he is full-blown Uzi. He is our friend. He is the venerable host and moderator over at Screenfish and Screenfish Radio, Mr. Steve Norton. Hey, dude. How you doing today, man?
Thank you so much, Dave. I'm doing good. And you made me Sami Zayn?
I did.
And Eric has no idea what we're talking
Exactly.
Oh, man. Oh, no.
about. No, you've seen a Royal Rumble or two, you know.
I love Sergeant Slaughter.
Yeah.
Wow. Eddie's disease. Like those current guys that are right in the game.
Yeah. Roddy,
Roddy Piper.
All my favorites, yeah.
Now, for those of you who don't know, I mean, we, with TIFF coming up from September 7th through 17th,
That's right.
the vibe is going to be a little different as we are sitting here in the patio space with our friends at Elevation Pictures, high above the streets of Toronto, sort of in the wild, getting ready for TIFF. But it's not going to quite have the shine that it usually does, because we are in the midst of a pretty tumultuous actor strike and writer strike that's going on right now, which means we're not going to get nearly as many stars or any talent coming to the festival this year. It looks like so far as of this taping. I mean, just initial reaction from all of you guys. Just how do you think this edition of TIFF is looking?
I mean, I'll kick it off. I think it's starting with that is interesting, because everything TIFF has said is that hasn't affected the festival at all, which I find it kind of hard to believe, right? Especially when you look up I don't want to start on like a super negative note, but you look at the lineups of Venice and the New York Film Festival, which just added even more films today. I kind of find that hard to believe that it didn't affect the lineup, but then I'm kind of contradicting myself, because then why didn't that affect the lineup of those other festivals? So as a whole, like, I'm still excited for the festival, but I feel like it's missing those, and I'm the blockbuster, the big guy of us two, where I like those big glitzy, glamorous kind of big premieres, and I feel like we're missing a bunch of those this year. However, and we did this on our own show, which you guys can check out too, but like it does lean into, okay, maybe that lends for more discovery this year, or more kind of sleeper hits and things like that. So I'm hoping that maybe I'm less excited as a whole, but then I hope that lends to seeing some films that I'm like, oh, okay, I'll fit this into my schedule. It sounds interesting from the description or something like that. And then I'm kind of pleasantly surprised. So I don't know. I'm kind of mixed negative maybe on the fest this year.
We're going in a little trepidatious.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, all right.
So I don't know.
It's like going to Oshawa. Be prepared to be amazed, and that's the way to go down that road. I mean, ultimately, obviously, pay your writers, studios, and pay your actors, and support the creatives that make the work and the art that we love and that we can enjoy, year after year, day after day, and that we consume it as a part of our lives, and that is, I think, some of the most important aspects of who we are as both journalists, interviewers, reporters, critics, but just as people as well. And I think that that's something that you can see it in how the festival is operating this year. And there are, to go off of that, there are a lot of movies that are very much, curiosities or exciting in one way or another. But coming after a year where Steven Spielberg brought The Fabelmans, and coming out of a pandemic where there was a virtual component, and being back in the public and communal experience of going to the movies, there is something that is lacking. But having said that, I do think that The Boy and the Heron is maybe one of the best opening movies TIFF has ever had.
That I agree with you on that. Steve, what do you think? Because I mean, having The Boy and the Heron opening, I mean, that's a good movie to really start on, because it is the opening night film. I mean, it is the first foreign film, if I'm not mistaken. It's the first animated film, if I'm not mistaken, to open the festival. And it's also the first film, again, if I'm not mistaken, to already be open in another country. It was already playing in the state of Japan. Yeah.
Without a lot of advertising as well, which is very unusual for any movie, whether it be international or national in terms of marketing.
No, for sure, and it being Studio Ghibli, and I mean this master of cinema's last film, it's definitely an interesting transition. I mean, Steve, what do you think as someone going into this, seeing a gala opening that's not necessarily going to have a red carpet even?
I've been thinking about this a lot. One of the things I think about this year that actually has me excited about it, I like the word surprise that you said before, because I think that that's anything this year. We're not going to be told what's good before we get there.
That's a good point.
And every year we get there and there's a red carpet and there's hype because all these people are coming to town. I actually think maybe this year the emphasis is really going to be on stories more than other years, or at least in recent years. And that's not a criticism of the previous festivals. It's just the fact that all we've got are the stories. Like in the pandemic, we didn't have any of this, and they were doing the virtual festival. It was just straight up virtual. The focus is on the stories that they want to tell. But I mean, the reality is with these ones, there is less hype. But I don't think that means it's going to be a bad festival. I just think it means, what I do think it's going to be, because it's less hype, it's going to be interesting to see how it interacts with the regular public. You know, so like on a regular festival weekend, the streets are absolutely teeming with people who are trying to get a snapshot of their favorite celebrity. I don't know a lot of people are going to, and this is not a comment about him, but are people going to be standing outside to get a shot of Hayao Miyazaki on their cell phone?
He's not even coming. He's in his 90s. So.
Well, there you go. So they're not going to get that anyway. But I think I think for the festival perspective, I think that's not bad. It just puts an emphasis on the films that we're going to get, as opposed to the hype.
No, it allows for the stories to go first and foremost, which again, I mean, which just really speaks to the core spirit of TIFF. Because I mean, I think we can definitely agree. In past years, like the celebrity aspect of it has maybe sort of drowned out some of the fantastic films and storytelling that have come out of past editions of the festival.
Yeah, I mean, I think low expectations always leads to being pleasantly surprised, which I think can be a good thing too. Where in other years I go, Spielberg's coming, Glass Onion's here, like what a great, like all these big movies. Where then you go, and a lot of times in previous years I go with all this hype, and then you go, oh, it was okay, or like the movie was all right, I enjoyed it, or something like that. So I'm hoping the opposite effect, where I go in this year going, I don't know if I'm that excited for a bunch of stuff. And then I go, oh, this is amazing, or go see this movie. And then when it comes to what you said about the public, I thought the exact same thing, where this is a public film festival, where many are for media only, or a mix, or for the elite in certain places and stuff like that.
Cough, tell you right, cough.
So I think this being the People's Festival, what it used to be called too, is like, I will be interested to see if that excitement, I still think it will be there. I still think people like going to a movie at Princess of Wales or Roy Thompson Hall or something like that.
Midnight Madness.
Midnight Madness is always the best, and I think that passionate fan base, I think they brought back the Midnight Madness package this year too, which I'm glad that they did for those people who just love going to that program. So I still think the excitement will be there, and I feel like we're sometimes in our film bubble where I'm always interested to see what the public feels, right? And if they just like going to TIFF, and a lot of times even those bigger movies, do they even know much about them, or we think they do because we know that it's Spielberg or whatever. Like my mom went to TIFF for the first time last year, and I brought her to the Fabelmans and My Policeman, because you just try to find. She knows nothing about probably either movie. She knows who Steven Spielberg is, but wouldn't have known that he had a movie at the festival unless I told her. So I feel like maybe this year a lot of them are comp tickets through businesses and things like that, and maybe it'll lend to that discovery aspect. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, and I do think Miyazaki has enough of an audience internationally.
Oh, Ghibli, for sure.
Yeah, Studio Ghibli, because of a lot of kids grew up in the 80s and 90s with it, but even now they're being reintroduced to it. Even as we're talking, Cineplex and certain movie theaters are re-showing certain films of his. So I think that aspect is just exciting as well, where you have somebody who's this great auteur filmmaker who, is letting the work speak for itself. Yeah. And that's always exciting, like him and Terrence Malick and those kind of guys. Like, they just, release the movies and see how it does, and you can kind of project on it the way that you want to and interpret it the way that you do, and not necessarily hear how others influence maybe your opinion on something, or how you're being told what to think about it before it comes out. Because even the Japanese press, towards the film has been quite muted overall. So it's kind of surprising that way.
Now, I mean, just on that note, I think it's time we should probably dive into sort of the galas and the special presentations, which again is what the mass audiences tend to look at. And I mean, on one end, there are some pretty interesting filmmakers that are part of it, like Craig Gillespie, like Richard Linklater, like Alexander Payne.
Yeah,
they have
absolutely.
movies coming up, and also the trend of actors who are directing, which does seem to be
How
a
you
little bit of a
get the-
theme
yeah.
with people like Anna Kendrick and Michael Keaton and Ethan Hawke having their own movies that they directed coming to
Chris Pine.
Chris Pine, yeah.
The pool man himself.
Exactly. having films that they directed come to the festival, and I mean, just out of that sort of initial high-profile batch, like, is there anything you guys are anticipating or looking forward to?
Is it just in terms of the programs, or from actors turned directors?
A little bit of both, but I mean, like more like let's focus like
We
on
already
like
said Cool
galas
Man.
and like special presentation kind of stuff.
I mean, the best Hollywood Chris. Like, I am excited for Cool Man. I think you already mentioned the Linklater. I think that's up there. Like, Linklater is one of those guys that's hit or miss for me personally, but I love Glenn Powell. I loved Everybody Wants Some. I thought Glenn Powell was fantastic in that movie and in Top Gun Maverick. So I'm really looking forward to Hitman and having Glenn Powell like be the lead and see if he can kind of handle that. I think will be really, really awesome. So I think that's one from those heavy hitters that I'm very excited about to throw out there.
Yeah, we should also mention quickly about Pool Man. I know we're joking about it a lot, but it's screening in 35mm, which I find fascinating. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
So, Chris Pine, a tour filmmaker.
The next Bradley Cooper.
Yes, exactly. Can't wait for Maestro 2. I would say the Zone of Interest is the one that I'm most interested in. I don't want to use the word excited because I don't think that's the appropriate word to use. Played at Cannes. Did quite well. Jonathan Glazer is one of those filmmakers that takes his time when it comes to finding the narrative structure of his movies. This is loosely based on Martin Amis's novel of the same name. The author passed away actually a couple of days after the Cannes premiere. And what you have is a story about a Nazi family living an idyllic lifestyle outside of a concentration camp and pretending like nothing is going on or apathetic to the world around them. Glazer is a very austere, cold, and calculated filmmaker, and you look at his past works like Under the Skin, Birth, and Sexy Beast, and in addition to his music videos and his ads, and he's got such a unique style that has influenced and shaped the last 2 decades worth of cinema and only a few films, and his movies, specifically images in his films, linger with you. I think the shot of an abandoned baby on a beach as the tide comes pouring in and Under the Skin is an image that haunts you even if you don't like the movie long afterwards, and it kind of sticks in your brain and you try to purge yourself of it, but you can't. So I can only imagine what this is going to be like, and having a cinematographer who has also worked with Paweł Pawlikowski and also recently shot I'm Thinking of Ending Things only adds to the cinematic experience of what this is going to be.
No, absolutely. I mean, I absolutely concur on that. But I mean, there's also 2 other filmmakers in this pack that I kind of want to bring up because at least in the back of my mind, they feel like they're going to be sort of built in to be sort of the People's Choice, the Audience Award winners. And that's Taika Waititi coming in with Still Wins. But also John Carney and Flora and Son, who does have a track record of making movies that will please the masses. And I mean, I'm just kind of curious. Will it be harder to find the crowd pleasers, or do you think people are going to be up to sort of doing a little bit of digging? Because, I mean, Taika obviously is at a different level, but I mean, when people think of Once or beginning, like a movie like Once, they don't necessarily think of John Carney. But he has made movies like that, so I mean, I'm kind of curious.
He's made the same film over and over
Well,
again.
therein lies the rub, but yeah. Are there ones that you think, especially in this grouping, that may sort of surprise people, just based on what we know from sort of the inside looking out?
From like a perspective of like audience.
Yeah, like audience
Audience
like
love.
ones that will pick up the buzz kind of thing as people are attending the festival.
Those 2 were really good choices.
Yeah.
I think the track records and the types of films that both filmmakers are prone to making. I do feel there's a little bit, and maybe this is again inside of our bubble, a little bit of backlash or sort of people being burnt out on Taika Waititi a little bit. Yeah, because of just that overexposure. He's got a larger-than-life personality and a dry wit that can sometimes rub people the wrong way. And having made multiple movies over the last 4 years, it does feel a little bit like maybe he's overstayed his welcome, and there's been some problems with that movie as well in terms of doing reshoots and replacing one actor for another. Specifically, the problematic nature of Armie Hammer and replacing him with Will Arnett.
Yeah.
So there. But again, those things maybe a lot of people that are just like this is also a public festival. This is open to the public, so maybe those people aren't looking at it that way.
And I do think Taika is one of those directors that, yes, I think maybe if you go on the street and ask 10 random people that, like, Spielberg's one of those guys. Taika, with doing the Thor movies and having that larger-than-life personality, he might be one of those guys that some people do be able to, like, recognize or know by name.
Or voice.
And I think and Steve, I'll let you go in a sec, sorry. I think that, like, true story, sports, inspirational movie, that shit just always
takes off all the
works.
It does,
It always works, and it's like, some of them are great, no doubt, but it's just, I mean, recently with Gran Turismo, like, I just feel like you see that with an audience and it plays so well, and then I think in our sometimes bubbles, we can be a little bit more critical, so I do think that movie will play really well with an audience, even if maybe it reviews mixed, or maybe it'll review great, because, like, I don't know, I think Taika's one of those filmmakers now that does get kind of a divisive response from critics especially, but I don't know, I'm looking forward to it, but I am kind of burnt out on Taika as well.
Well, it's interesting because, again, we're talking about the public, and I think in a case like Taika, the audience for a festival like this, they're going to be looking for somebody they have a connection with.
That's true, too.
So whether or not they're burnt out on Taika, they're going to look at their list and they're going to go, oh, Taika.
Yeah.
And there's a reason he's announced first. And so much of it, I think, and this is my opinion, I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, you announce Taika at a year when you know there's no big press stuff because everybody knows who he is.
Yeah.
And yes, he's opening. It's like, bang, he's going to be here, he's going to premiere the film, and it is a fun film, and it's something that everybody can immediately connect in some way before they even see it.
Yeah.
Plus, it's already got a deal, and so we know it's coming out in theaters, but it's something that people they're like, oh, I know what that is. I know what that's going to be. And I think people will be looking for that.
Absolutely.
And that's also a good point to make, because it's almost like the politics angle. You go for somebody you're familiar with,
exactly,
right? Instead of going with the unknown, even if the unknown might actually turn out to be better.
Yeah.
Because at least you know what you're dealing with.
No, I mean, I think that's a good way to transition into, I guess the program that's probably best described as the program for us, the platform program, which is like the film people looking at films, and the one that has a jury, a fantastic lineup this year with
Barry Jenkins,
Barry and Anthony Shin, and who's the third one? Who's the okay? I went through our notes on Nadine Labaki. Yeah, she's the third juror from. Yeah, she did Capernaum and Where Do We Go Now? But I mean, it's 10 films from a diverse array of filmmakers, and I mean one specifically who is kind of coming back onto the scene for the first time in a while, in Tarsem Singh, with his film Dear Jassy. And I mean, just from initial glances, is there anything in the platform program, like speaking to, our people, the film nerds, as it were, the people who are probably listening to the show right now, is there something in that program that kind of stood out for you guys that made you go, I want to go see that?
Well, you mentioned Tarsem, which I think, having made movies like The Fall and The Cell, and his last movie was 8 years ago, Immortals, with Henry Cavill and Mickey Rourke. People are probably excited to see an epic, a spectacle that will be very much almost music video adjacent in some ways, and super stylish. And that bombastic nature has been something that a lot of people have really loved coming back to the theater, in a world where the pandemic has put doubts on the theatrical experience. So I think seeing something like that in a theatrical context with a group of people that are very excited to see, a master filmmaker like him come back and do something that is maybe unexpected but also familiar, and tell an earnest love story in a very externalized fashion, I think is going to be exciting for a lot of people.
I have to shout out Nick Cage in Dream Scenario, the film that A24 has, and I think anytime Nick Cage comes to TIFF is exciting. him being in a platform movie that's
The Cyberrace.
co-produced by Ari Aster, about a man who starts appearing in people's dreams and goes viral for it. I don't know a ton about it other than that.
It was
but,
shot in Toronto and Hamilton, and then also the director of the film had a movie come out last year and this year. It played the festival circuit last year, and it got released through Vinegar Syndrome on Blu-ray called Sick of Myself.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But yeah, so I think I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by Great Absence. That's what I'm looking for. I don't know the work of Kei Chikura. I hope I said that well, but
I hope you do too. But I mean, well,
whatever.
Kai, if you're listening, let us know.
But I was reading up on that one, and I thought it looked really interesting. And I'm actually really intrigued by the King Tide.
Yeah, so am I.
I'm keeping
it's
an
a
eye on
Canadian
that
movie,
one.
and I mean, there seems to be a groundswell for that one as well. That is kind of unexpected.
Yeah. And this is, again, a program to keep an eye on, because in years past it has had movies like Lady Macbeth, Jackie, Moonlight.
Yes.
You know, these are films that have launched careers, whether it be the actors or the filmmakers, and usually are some of the most exciting films to come into the festival.
Was How to Blow Up a Pipeline?
Yes, last
Was
year.
that platform?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
wow.
and also, you know, when you're looking at programmers as well, Peter Kuplowski talking about How to Blow Up a Pipeline, programmed that in platform, and he also programmed Dream Scenarios. So if you're looking for, you know, certain programmers outside of their normal venues, you know, I think Peter programming Dream Scenario is almost sort of like an endorsement to be like, oh, this might have been a Vanguard movie.
Yeah, we talked about that.
back
Now
in
that
the day.
Vanguard's kind of gone,
Yeah,
they
no,
kind of show up in obviously different programs, but platform being one.
And
of
I'm
the
glad you guys
places
brought
to-
that up, because this definitely does feel like it's the program for films that can't quite find a home,
Yeah.
but still deserve to be seen.
Absolutely,
And at least
yeah.
from my perspective, I think that's what makes some of these the most interesting. Because I mean, like you guys were saying, I mean, like with guys like Darius Marder, and I mean, you know, Barry Jenkins and Ben Wheatley, and so many other people who have come out of this program, it's definitely one for fans to keep an eye on if they want to take a chance. Like if anyone wants to take a chance, this is the program, at least in my opinion, where it's going to be hard to go wrong.
One of these directors might one day direct the Meg 3.
The really, really, really deep trench. But I mean, I'm glad you brought up Peter too, because I mean, this feels like a good time to transition over to Midnight Madness, which is the one that, you know, everyone always loves. I mean, I think collectively all three of us can agree we're a little too old for that shit now, because we're getting up.
Yeah, I love
The spirit is
The
right.
spirit and
I
the
love that
energy
it's a
is
thing.
there.
That's-
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's my favorite thing at TIFF are those Midnight Madness screenings. But yeah, as I get older, and those 8:30 a.m. press screenings. And stuff
Yeah,
like that, it's
exactly,
like,
yeah.
It makes it harder and harder for me to do multiple of them. I try to every year still go to at least one. I try to, and we'll see if this year.
But it
Do
does-
you
it
see
does
it
ra-
at midnight, or
Yeah,
do you go
no, I
to?
do. No, I usually try to see multiple, because I really think Peter's great at what he does, and I think the Midnight Madness lineup is always super interesting, because he doesn't do that classic midnight thing of just playing horror movies or things like that. He always has a mix of raunchy comedies or martial arts films, and then some straight horror stuff and things like that. But yeah, we can get into it.
And I mean, there are some interesting directors like Harmony Korine, Larry Charles, Finn Wolfhard, another actor turned director.
Yeah. Oh, that's true too. Yeah.
And I
didn't see
mean,
him on
like,
there.
I'm kind of looking forward to Kill,
Yeah.
the Bollywood sort of martial arts movie, which I think is probably going to be gonzo and a hell of a lot of fun. But I mean, is there anything you guys have standing out for you? I mean, I think Dick's the Musical is probably the one that people are really going to be.
I think that'll be a really fun
Yeah.
opening night kind of movie with a crowd, but I think we're both...
It's an acquired taste, but Harmony Korine is one of those filmmakers that, if you have a chance to experience his film at a festival, having seen both Spring Breakers and Trash Humpers at TIFF, it's like nothing else, especially when the crowd isn't sure what they're getting, because you can feel the hostility in the room, so that's always fun. But because it is playing in Midnight Madness, we're talking about Aggro Drift, I think there will be more people that will be responsive to it, or at least know what they're getting into, where, you know, you look at something like Spring Breakers, I think a lot of people that were excited to see a Selena Gomez movie at TIFF weren't expecting to get...
Which
you
that
know,
was just in special presentation, wasn't it?
yeah, to get sort of a weird avant-garde spring break, psychedelic balls to the wall trip out kind of thing. And so yeah, and the movie, you know, starring Travis Scott and being shot completely in infrared is not an easy sell, but it is a unique experience, and almost like the way that just talking about it, it sounds like it could be in wavelengths, just how experimental it is.
But I mean, there is no denying the party aspect of Midnight Madness, and I mean, and given the size of the venue as well, I mean, just as a tip for anyone who is sort of going ticket by ticket, I mean, that's a good one you can rush, because just in terms of capacity, there's a chance you'll get in.
Yeah, now at the Royal Alexander.
At the Royal Alexander with like 1,200 seats available,
Yeah.
so it's like, it's always one that draws an audience, but it's one that, you know, will be accessible as well if you decide last minute, I'm going to try Midnight Madness for the first time, you know?
Yeah, this is an interesting sequel to last year's show we did with you, because it was the first year last year with that.
That's right. Yeah.
And we weren't sure because they changed a bunch of the venues. They got rid of Elgin and Winter Garden, and they moved everything, just everything to King Street. So not to get sidetracked, but how did you guys feel about it all being centralized, the new location for Midnight Madness? Did you feel like any of the Ryerson was lost? Because like I felt like it was a pretty solid.
I missed the leg room though. That was
that was nice. Yeah. No, but I mean, I would say
leg room on the balcony.
Like Peter, Tiff, and the entire crew did manage to sort of recreate as much of the energy of it as they possibly could, and I mean, then they're definitely creating their own tradition, sort of being there now.
I'll give you one knock against it. I love that everything felt close. One thing I felt about it last year is it felt less of a city festival to me, and I said, it was far more convenient. It was far better, but the cool thing about having the Ryerson and the Elgin and the Winter Garden, it was sort of like it was like Toronto's thing, right? And it's still Toronto's thing. So that's not what I'm saying. But with everything in one spot, it's like it's King Streets.
Yeah, and they slowly, because when we started stuff at Varsity and you know, and we had stuff.
Even at Hot Docs,
right? Hot Docs, it slowly kind of
compressed
into where Lightbox is, which I agree with you that it's not a bad thing per se. Like it is very nice when you cram in 5 movies a day that I don't have to be like, fuck, I gotta be at the Ryerson in 20 minutes.
That's right,
like,
or 7.
Yeah, exactly.
So even when films played at Yonge and Dundas, like it's such a
that was a weird time.
It's changed so much over the years, and I think part of it is just nostalgia as well.
Well,
like,
for sure.
You know, when you're sitting in the Ryerson Theater and you know, Peter comes on the stage, or Colin Getty's in the past, and you know, that beach ball is flying up in the air, and you have a crowd that's just feeding off of that excitement. If anybody listening to this has never gone to a Midnight Madness screening and have always thought about it, do it. It's worth it. Like even just for one movie, you know, it's like nothing else, and the crowd is great. There are so many stories. There's one that Matt and I always talk about. Jason Momoa walking past us during the Bad Batch. That was amazing. He was holding a Brita filter full of water that looked in his hand almost just like a little cup. And we were laughing, and he just told us to shut the fuck up, but in a way that was
a funny
way.
But he was carrying this Brita jug around and filling up these giant bottles of water.
Yeah.
Like, that man drinks a lot of water.
He's got to stay hydrated. It's Aquaman.
Absolutely.
And it's things like that you'll always kind of hold dear, I think, you know, in like those moments.
Getting back to the lineup, it's great. Dix the musical, I'm Larry Charles is. I love Borat. I love Seinfeld.
Yeah, I mean, part of the Midnight Madness charm is almost the lineup as much as it is the movies, isn't it?
Yeah.
Give me Boy Kills World.
Yeah.
Tap into my vein. Give me Boy Kills World.
Yeah.
Let's see it happen.
Is that the one?
With Bill Skarsgård.
Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah.
Rainey produced it, I think.
Yes, he did.
How well
Yes,
will
he
he
did.
fare in this compared to Barbarian?
Now, I mean, let's transition over to Discovery, which is an interesting program because it's got 26 films, and it's got a perfect line divide. 13 of the films are directed by women.
Amazing.
And I mean, which is obviously a fantastic thing. And I mean, just the opening night film of Discovery is yet another actor turned director, with Patricia Arquette coming to the festival with her film. And I mean, there's a couple of Canadian ones there too that have really caught my eye. Things like Backspot and I Don't Know Who You Are, which are kind of piquing my interest as Canadian cinema. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, what do you guys think about not only sort of this program, but just sort of the ability that a program like this has been able to get sort of perfect parity with like 13 out of 26 being female filmmakers?
It's fantastic. I mean, I love that we're getting closer and closer to the entire festival being like that.
Exactly,
That's ideally what you want everyone to be represented. And This program, I think, sums up what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, too, right? Like, we hope that this year is the year of discovery, because they don't have those, they do have them. We've already talked
He's
about
here all
that.
week, everybody.
No, I just think it's like, it's a perfect summation of what maybe the theming of this festival is like, just go in, read the descriptions. Like, again, I don't know a lot about these films.
Right.
Like,
none of us do. That's kind of the point. As much as we're the quote-unquote experts, we're going in blind to a lot of this stuff.
And I've read the descriptions of each one of them. I can't even, recall them, but, I remember bookmarking them and trying to throw them into my TIFFer, which also shout out to TIFFer.
Yeah, shout out to TIFFer, absolutely. TIFFer is
the lifesaver of TIFF.
If you are planning a festival, and you want to attend TIFF, and you're buying a bunch of tickets, use TIFFer.
It's
we love them.
A godsend. And I just think it's that kind of festival this year where I'm gonna probably try to throw at least a couple of these on, or if not a whole bunch, and try to just find something that I didn't know I was going to love. So
yeah, I think just looking at the list, the only one I'm kind of familiar with because it was picked up at during Cannes was How to Have Sex, and that movie played quite well, and a new voice talking about sort of British culture in the 21st century, I think is going to be an interesting sort of look inside how teens and adolescents act and behave, but in a way that doesn't feel like it's condescending in any way. So I think that's one of those movies that will be exciting to see it kind of be reintroduced to the Fall Film Festival circuit in that way. But yeah, I think Matt's absolutely right in just talking about discovery as a whole, where this festival is making a conscious effort to spread the wealth and show that there are filmmakers of all walks of life and backgrounds that are making really interesting stuff that maybe aren't big names but have something to say. And so to have more female directors, more non-binary filmmakers, these are things that are really important, because those voices not only need to be heard, but they're great filmmakers out there, and they're great movies that aren't having that chance to be showcased. So TIFF is a great platform to use that and to have those voices heard.
And what's I'm going to misquote it. What's TIFF's slogan? Isn't it changing the world one film at a time, or something to that effect? Something changing the way we see the world through film, or something to that effect. Yeah. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about the festival, is that they're actually trying to do that in some way subtly. Yeah. They're like, what we want to do? We want to open the space. We want to have more voices. We don't just want to give you the same 10 filmmakers you've ever heard. Yeah. And we want to give you opportunity to hear from so many different people, representations, gender, sexuality, all that stuff. We want to give that to you. Let people speak, and let's have those conversations around their stories. I think is absolutely remarkable. And that's the best part to me about a film festival, is when you take. I mean, I like the big hype ones too. I admit it. I get excited. And I say, I'm excited about Dumb Money. I can't wait for that one. But there's something about stepping into a theater with a filmmaker you don't know, and letting them tell their story to you. Yeah. And it makes more sense, like cognitively in some ways, with a film festival, because on a week to week, most people aren't saying, it's Saturday night, I really want to chill with this auteur that I've never heard of. Right. At a film festival, there's a vibe of listen to the stories we've got to share with you. Come and experiment with us. And I think that's really cool. And I love that about the Discovery section as well.
I love that you brought that up, man. That is absolutely a beautiful thing. You couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, I just 1 second jump on that is even for those big movies and small ones, festivals are great because, for that exact reason of going in and you haven't been swayed by marketing for the most part. Some of these movies have trailers and things like that. Yeah. But that's the one thing I love. Are there actors you don't know either and things like that, and you just go in completely fresh and aren't affected, because even though we're critics and you go in as unbiased as you possibly can be, I still see trailers sometimes, and that hype does come in, and it's a whole thing of going in without any of that baggage is so refreshing, and one reason why I also love film festivals. It's just for big, small movies, they're all kind of on an even playing field. Not really, because some get big premieres at Princess of Wales and things like that, so you do have that's playing there, so that must be a bigger movie in air quotes if no one can see me. But anyways, I completely agree with that. I think it's a great point.
I remember years ago stepping into Martha Marcy May Marlene. Yep. And I was like, who is this young actor? Oh my gosh, she's an Olsen?
Yeah.
And now she's Scarlet Witch. But I'm like, at the time, she was just stepping out.
Right, yeah,
It was
yeah.
such a raw film. I'm
Yeah.
like, this girl, she has it.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see these stories sort of step in.
Yeah, we all, I think, have those stories. Like, I remember seeing Hunger at the festival
Oh, yeah.
and thinking to myself, yeah, who is this filmmaker that can, put two people in Michael Fassbender and Liam Cunningham, sitting across a table from each other and having one of the most important conversations about Irish politics and sort of, being colonized by British democracy, and saying so much and saying in the way that is not convoluted in any way whatsoever, and it being an unbroken shot. And then realizing, oh man, this is somebody who I need to pay attention to. And seeing Steve McQueen, over the years become one of the best filmmakers of all time.
If you've never seen a Steve McQueen Q&A, it is something.
Oh yeah, that man does not hold back his punches, and he does not tolerate fools, and
It's
love him for it.
awkward and amazing, and it's great.
And I love that you brought that up because, I mean, discovery is such a good word, especially for this program, but I mean for the festival in general, because when we think of cinema and things being cinematic, there are movies in these programs that allow us to appreciate and understand the economies of scale. And something like Hunger that you brought up, it is cinematic, it is huge, it is brutal, but it's singular.
Mm-hmm.
It's so simple. And there are so many filmmakers out there that are capable of that talent, and when we get to see it on display at a festival like this, it's just a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
Just before we continue any further, I'd like to remind everyone that this podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Elevation Pictures and their release of probably one of the more interesting Canadian films that we've seen in recent years, Blackberry, the rise and fall of the little company that could, and it's again, it's available on. It's one of the. It's a nice piece of Canadiana, which I encourage people to go see. From director Mac Johnson and starring Jay Baruchel, Glenn Howerton, a bunch of other people, is available on Blu-ray, DVD, and video-on-demand platforms now. But guys, let's continue on the train that is TIFF, and we're going to talk about the Centerpiece program, which was formerly known as the Contemporary World Cinema program. Let's talk, what do you guys think of the name change?
It's interesting. We were talking a little bit off air about this, and I don't understand it completely. Not to crap on any of the movies. There's some great films that are in this program. Centerpiece is usually something at a film festival that you have one film that's your centerpiece film. Not necessarily every film festival. Everyone's different. And I was saying maybe it's because we were talking about how the festival doesn't have a lot of glitzy movies this year. There's still some. But that maybe they're trying to reinvent themselves a little bit to be more of a international film festival, which is in the title. And if they're trying to be more of that film festival where you're discovering films from new filmmakers, from foreign filmmakers, all those other things. So I assume that's maybe the name change, but then the other cynical part of me is like, oh, they didn't get a lot of those glitzy movies, so let's try to make this sound like it is super important. And I'm not saying that it's not important, but
Right.
you know what I'm saying with that, right?
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, I don't know. How do you feel?
I feel the same way. I was a little bit confused because contemporary world cinema, it's something we go to when we're looking for new voices, but also, people that have established themselves over the past few decades or so, and things like that.
Filmmakers, things like
So
that.
it's a really nice kind of grouping of new and seasoned filmmakers all, getting a chance to share this program together. And like you said, there are other festivals like the New York Film Festival where their centerpiece movie is one film specifically, and it's almost like a way to mark, okay, you have the opening film, the middle movie, and then the closing film, and everything in between is other programs. And so just to have the name change and then all of these movies that are programmed within it, it's a little bit odd in that way. But again, there's a lot of really good stuff there. You have a Wim Wenders movie in that grouping, which, Wim Wenders is one of those guys who in the 70s up until the early 90s had one of the most incredible runs with the road films, with Paris, Texas, Wings of Desire, movies that are just incredibly profound and emotionally moving, but also so stylish. If you think about like Paris, Texas, and The American Friend in terms of how Robert Mueller's cinematography comes together with that kind of neon look that very much now seems to be in vogue in a lot of ways.
Totally,
right?
yeah.
Like I think A24's whole aesthetic.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that
That's the wheelhouse. Yeah.
But he kind of fell off a little bit in the '90s and into the 2000s, and everything that we've heard at Cannes, Neon picking up Perfect Days, suggests that this is a little bit of a comeback, for him as a filmmaker, and at least in terms of fictional narratives.
No, and there are some interesting filmmakers in this program too. Like you said, Wim Wenders, Ryusuke Hamaguchi, who people would know from Drive My Car.
Yeah.
Brian Helgeland, and there's one that it's Canadian, but admittedly, I'm dying to see this. But Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting
Great
Suicidal
title,
Person is the best title ever. Man.
If one country does vampires better than the rest, it's Canada, because you look at TV shows like Forever Night,
Right.
or you look at Blood and Donuts.
For sure.
Genre and vampires in Canada, can't go wrong.
And that's another thing to remind audiences of, that this, contemporary world cinema, aka Centerpiece now, is not necessarily a genre. It's just it's a diverse array of really sort of interesting stuff. And I'm always a fan of this program in past iterations.
Yeah.
And this program this year looks really interesting as well. And I'm just curious, do you think this is another one of those ones that is rife for exploration from fans?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, again, going back to the name change, I agree with you, Dave. I think that's completely accurate. But then when you have galas, special presentations, and Centerpiece, those all sound like they're the same program.
Yes, they
so
do.
Contemporary world cinema, I felt like gave a clearer idea of what
An
the
identity.
program, what the program was. Where I think it kind of hinders that. Where then you go, oh, okay, maybe people are expecting big movies in here because it's called that or something like that. But I do think it lends itself. That program always did. Of whether they're big filmmakers or big international filmmakers, or it's still some more stuff that you might discover. But I think it will lend to that as well. I guess I'm so fixated on the change.
It's
the name.
That's exactly that's what I'm saying. Is the name itself is the odd part. The films look great.
Yeah, I know.
They're absolutely up for exploration. I'm all for it. But with the title like Centerpiece, it sounds like it's competing with the galas and the special presentations. But the clarity was nice. It was nice. Like, you knew what you were going into. Now, will it matter this year? I don't think so, because people, I think, more than ever are going to be looking at the titles of the films, and they're going to be looking at that.
Reading the descriptions.
But it's just odd marketing to me.
Well, if anything, this is probably the year where the use of creative and colorful adjectives in describing sort of the wide array of things that are going on is like being used almost in overdrive a little bit.
Get out your thesaurus, people, because it's going to be a wild ride.
Next year, it's just they'll have a program called The Best Films and the Most Interesting Films.
Movies. Memes.
And just on that note, I think this is a good time to transition to yet another program. Again, probably one of my personal favorites. I've always been a big Doc fan, but I think we're going to have to start and talk about probably the elephant in the room, because it's going to be the closing night film, Sly, the story of Sylvester Stallone, the Netflix story of the life and the career of the man himself, is closing out the festival. And I'm wondering, as much as I want to see this film, there's also that curse of the closing night film, which seems to be looming over this as well, and it's making me wonder, and I'm kind of curious your thoughts on that.
And is he producing it or anything either? Is it a puff piece?
It seems like it's a bit of a vanity project,
Yeah.
and it's with Bruce Springsteen's usual director or buddy. His name's Tom Zimny, is it? I believe?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Because I think it's just basically Stallone's career is a fascinating one. It's a guy who has gone through cycles of stardom, starting out as a Roger Corman guy, and then obviously the Italian Stallion stuff, and making it with Rocky, and then becoming one of the most dominant movie stars of the 80s and into the 90s, and then continually reinventing himself. And in a way, he doesn't get a lot of credit for the work that he does as a director and a writer and somebody that's actually very smart when it comes to how he projects his image.
Absolutely.
I think he is a really great Renaissance man, and I know that sounds silly, but he knows what works for him, and he plays to his strengths really well, and he can be excellent in movies. And I think, like, you look at his performance as Rocky, like, obviously now it's become almost a parody onto itself. The choices he made as an actor in that role, I think, are just some of the most naturalistic, and that character is just fully formed. And even when you're watching, you know, the two Creed movies, it's an incredible piece of acting from somebody who's often considered to be a terrible actor. And, you know, part of that is the stigma with, like, the Razzies and things like that. But and he's made some bad choices. Let's be clear with that. But yeah, it's interesting, like, what kind of documentary is this going to be? Are we going to really get into who he is as a person, or is this just going to simply be a greatest hits of look at me and look what I've done? You know, Netflix also has the Arnold documentary series as well, so it kind of feels like this is the time for 80s beefcake, you know, muscle-bound heroes to get their moment. So maybe next year Dolph Lundgren or you know, one of those guys.
Yeah, I almost want a documentary that's more about the story of Arnold tricking Sly into doing "Stop My Mom" or "My Mom Will Shoot" rather than sort of a career retrospective. You know. See,
that would be an amazing short documentary in the same way that, you know, Werner Herzog ate the shoe after Earl Morris made Gates of Heaven in that way. So, yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up Errol Morris because, I mean, I think I'm really looking forward to the Pigeon Tunnel that dives into sort of the life and times of John le Carré. And, I mean, I'm curious. I mean, you and I have talked about this off mic just about how Errol Morris has really sort of evolved over the years. And, I mean, there is a slew of really interesting filmmakers in here. And I'm kind of curious, for all of you, is there anything in the doc lineup that's standing out a little bit more than maybe anything else?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Like, there's a documentary on Mr. Dress-Up.
Yeah,
How are we not all excited about this?
That's literally the same movie I was going to. I grew up with Mr. Dress-Up, so I'm kind of stoked about that. Yeah.
As of this taping, we don't have confirmation if Casey and Finnegan are going to walk the red carpet, so we don't know yet.
Are they going to be in solidarity with the?
Are they honoring? Are they in solidarity with SAG as we are, of course? But yeah.
And then you brought up Errol Morris, who will always have a special place in my heart because I met my wife at a screening of The Unknown Known 10 years ago. Was originally supposed to see a Xavier Dolan movie that got canceled.
Nothing's more romantic than Donald Rumsfeld.
And then my wife, she was snuck into the screening, and then with our friend Adriana, who's at Cineplex now, and they were like, "Oh, we're gonna go see this documentary about Donald Rumsfeld," and I was like, "I don't want to see this." But I was like, "This pretty girl's here." I'm like, "She's going to see it, so I'm going to see it." And I remember, no offense to that movie, he's a very good filmmaker, but I remember like sitting in the hallway of Varsity for like an hour because I didn't really even want to see it, but I wanted to speak to my future wife. So maybe Errol Morris will always have a special place in my heart for that. So.
Xavier Dolan and Donald Rumsfeld have
it's a weird
combined to make romance.
A weird.
That's what happens at TIFF. That's what happens at TIFF.
Unfortunate duo of people.
I think Earl Morris can't be taken for granted, and I think he has been a little bit, because when The Thin Blue Line came out, it was a movie that reinvented documentary as we knew it in terms of recreating sequences and you saw it in America's Most Wanted and TV shows like that where it was all procedural based, but when he did it, it was new, it was cutting edge, it was fresh, and his fixation on the most minute details on a person's life, or in the case of that movie, a case where a man was on death row. It's just fascinating entering his brain and then seeing it projected on the big screen. I don't know if his sort of focus on an individual is as interesting as it is sort of, again, like a situation or an environment. Gates of Heaven, a pet cemetery, or Vernon, Florida, with people living there and things like that. But, the fog of war and the unknown known, and they're still really worthwhile, and his style of filmmaking is some of the most interesting and interrogative in a very divisive kind of way, and I think that's always worth checking out.
No, absolutely. And I mean, combine that with someone like Alex Gibney, who definitely comes out of sort of that...
who never sleeps, that
He
guy.
never sleeps. And I mean, with the 3 hour and 20 minute story of the music of Paul Simon, for music fans, that's going to be interesting.
Did I
But I mean,
interview Alex Gibney? Who did I interview that year?
You may have. I remember one of us. Yeah, that's
When I
right.
went for tribute, there was, I forget.
You interviewed a lot of people, and those were a lot of really great interviews.
Yeah, it was 10 years ago.
But there's
I was a
another
young
doc in
boy.
here I want to talk about, which almost feels like a little bit of the circle coming to a close with Sorry Not Sorry, which focuses on the women who accused Louis C.K. of sexual harassment. And I mean, for people who don't remember, I mean, Louis C.K. had directed a film, and it was playing TIFF.
Yeah.
And he was on the brink of sort of hitting this next level. And then all this happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm kind of curious, what are your reactions on this playing the festival, almost to sort of put a bow on that, really, on that story?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing that they're showcasing this story, especially. I mean, I remember that very clearly, going to that premiere, and then it was right after that festival.
Yeah.
When everything came out. So yeah, I think good on TIFF for programming it. I don't know much about it, so I'm.
There is a cynical side to that, though. I think there is
Yeah.
a bit of damage control on TIFF's part, where they're trying to make amends for.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily TIFF's fault in that regard. that
Well,
they
no, of
played
course
that
not,
movie.
yeah.
If they
played-
programmed it after,
Yeah, then
I
that
get,
would.
like,
Yeah, it's not.
yeah.
We're not in a Venice situation here. So yeah, I think it's an important movie, and also just in the sense of where we are in the Me Too movement, or post Me Too movement. There's still a lot of work to be done, and a movie we didn't mention, the Elevation's releasing, called The Royal Hotel, which is Kitty Green's movie, who's also a documentary filmmaker who's done a couple narratives, The Royal Hotel, and The Assistant is looking at sexual abuse and misconduct in a narrative form. So I think this year there's still an important discussion to have, and not to forget about it in terms of workplace safety, but also just the complicit nature of people, and no means no.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, just as a side note, if you haven't seen The Assistant, check it out on various streamers and video on demand platforms. It is a unique and powerful film. I cannot recommend highly enough. But let's transition out of that and move into the program that he always needs a little bit of love. The program that always tends to confound some people, and it's Wavelengths. But it's always a personal favorite of mine, because there's always some really interesting stuff in there. And I mean, this year there are filmmakers like Denis Cote out of Canada, who always makes, I mean, sometimes very assaulting, but all very compelling stuff. And filmmakers like Kleber Mendahl Fael from Brazil, who I've probably butchered your name, so I apologize, sir. But I mean, he did stuff, he's done stuff in previous years like, why am I blanking? What are the names?
It's
of the films?
Wavelengths. You need a minute to.
I know
to
it's
digest.
but Baracao and also Neighboring Sounds. Those were his films.
Oh yeah, those are great movies.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm curious, diving into Wavelengths. Angela Shelinek, or okay. Again, if I mispronounce your name, I do apologize profusely.
Dave, if you ever listen to one of our preview shows,
You guys do it all the time. All right,
sure.
fair enough. But
it's
You're like 99% better than either Matt or I.
is there anything you guys are kind of looking to explore?
Well, I wanted to talk about something outside of this that I found kind of interesting. That there's nothing in terms of, maybe there will be during the festival, but there's no tribute to Michael Snow.
That's right.
His passing, and kind of being the man who made the Wavelength short, and kind of what inspired this program to begin with. And I find that kind of fascinating. Yeah, there's a Romanian movie that I think will.
Isn't it like a 3+ hour long?
Yeah, Don't Expect Too Much from the End of the World, which I've heard is supposed to be quite fun. But again, it's quite the commitment as well. And I do think Wavelength is the one program that a lot of people are a little bit more concerned about, venturing into, unless there maybe is a movie star. Like there was the one year where Hauha played with Viggo Mortensen.
Right.
And, to have a movie star in a very experimental film that's the gateway into a larger, stranger, more abstract world.
Yeah.
But the Denny Coate movie is playing on an IMAX screen, so
Right.
that's a very
Yeah,
curious.
exactly.
I always
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
That's one of those things. Like, we always shout this out every year, but if you're going to the festival, there are a couple. I mean, try to see a movie at a venue that you don't usually watch movies at, like Princess of Wales, Roy Thompson Hall. But then sometimes you see TIFF movies on the IMAX screen.
Yeah.
It's always listed as Scotiabank 12.
This is not formatted for
And
IMAX.
it's in the giant IMAX screen with very good laser projectors and stuff too. So it's it always looks great, but it's always wild. Like I saw Moonlight on that screen, and like there's Sound of Metal we saw there.
The Lobster.
The Lobster.
Darren
So,
Aronofsky was in your lap.
like a lot of movies that wouldn't have normally played in an IMAX cinema, and sure, it's not formatted for IMAX, but it's always so if you get to see a Wavelengths movie in an IMAX theater.
No, I mean that's a great point. Like if you get to see, a Paul Simon doc or,
Yeah.
or a Wavelengths movie or something that wouldn't necessarily play in something like Scotia 12, it definitely makes for a different experience.
Yeah.
And I know throughout the years we've had like experiences going, oh my god, this is playing in 12. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go see it because it's in 12.
I kind of go out of my way.
Yeah,
there.
it's
I
like
usually
I'm free and it's in 12. Sure.
in my schedule, I'll Control F and hit Scotia 12 and just kind of go through to see what's playing in there and go, that would be really wild to watch on that gigantic screen. So I definitely, that's a kind of insider tip for people who might not. It doesn't say IMAX or anything, but Scotia 12 for sure. Yeah.
And I mean, Wavelengths also has some short programs as well, and even one of them has films from some pretty luminary filmmakers like Chantal Akerman, Pedro Costa, Jean-Luc Godard. So there's always something to discover in something like Wavelengths. It's not going to be
That's a
cinema
theme.
for everybody.
That's
Yep.
a theme
It's like
this
Ontario.
year.
Yours
Yeah.
to discover.
Yours, maybe that they're embracing that.
Now, I mean, just to transition a little bit, because there is a classics program, and we've got to talk about the elephant in the room, the one that just got announced yesterday of Talking Heads reuniting.
Yeah.
And then Stop Making Sense playing sort of in the IMAX in 4K. It will be the ticket that none of us can get, but it will be the ticket that everybody wants to get.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm kind of curious, how do you guys feel, particularly because I love the fact that TIFF, and this is something they do year round, is try to highlight retrospective cinema. Because I mean, as obviously you guys know me well enough, I've always been a fan, at least with what I do over at In the Seats, to try to highlight some of the older stuff. Because I mean, again, if we're going to understand the newer stuff and appreciate the stuff that's happening and coming out, it always helps to watch the older stuff as well.
I'm notoriously awful at going back and watching anything before the year I came out. I came out. I mean, I guess it's technically true.
It's fair.
It is technically true. The year I came out, which is 1989. But like, I know I've watched a lot of 80s.
In theaters
movies.
Friday.
Yeah.
He was a bomb, ladies and gentlemen. He was a
But
box office bomb.
It's something we talk about too, of like trying to highlight. Like I've wanted to do that on our show. We do a review show where we mostly just cover new movies,
Yeah.
but I've wanted to sprinkle in older movies there, and
Like Mac and Me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I notoriously hated the David Byrne movie that
American Utopia, which
Yeah.
also Spike Lee is going to be the moderator for this Q&A, which is very exciting.
So I'm
as
not a
well,
Talking
so.
Heads guy. I'm not a David Byrne guy.
Yeah.
But I like that TIFF does this. They always do an IMAX event every year, which
Yeah,
is always
exactly,
I'm
yeah.
a huge fan. I mean, we just talked about it right before this, but like I'm a huge fan of that format of IMAX, and whether it's something converted to IMAX or actually shot on IMAX, like Nolan stuff. They brought him in for Dunkirk. They brought Jordan Peele last year in, right? Like those aren't necessarily old. Those were from earlier that year.
Yeah.
But I love those IMAX events that TIFF does, and I try to always go to them. This year, I'll probably just let someone who likes the Talking Heads take that ticket. But I don't know if it's on the level of that like Taylor Swift in conversation from last year. But
No, but
So what you're
I'm
saying
Talking
is it's
Heads
the same as it ever was? Is that what you're saying?
But Talking Heads has such a wide range in terms of generations of fans, and they continue to amass quite a lot of influence in people that are in the music industry and film. I remember the first time watching that movie. I've never seen it on the big screen, and but what Jonathan Demme did with the concert doc, it just made it very fresh and alive, and just even watching it just on a TV screen, that Palm Blu-ray, it just felt so immersive. Like you were
totally,
there, you could
totally.
feel the
Yeah,
sweat coming off
Yeah.
of David Byrne's face as he jumps around on stage, and it was just capturing this band at the perfect moment in their career. But it's also just going to be really fascinating to see that Q&A because, they haven't really talked to each other much in the last couple of decades, and David Byrne is known
that's
to
why
be,
it's such a big deal. Right?
Yeah, to be a bit of an egotistical maniac, and I love the guy, but, if you're a jerk, you're a jerk.
Yeah.
And somebody joked on Twitter that it's like, oh, this is going to be 15 seconds long, and then it's over.
Well, I guess people realize he did recently apologize or something.
Yeah.
That's why this is happening or something. But,
And I mean, it's interesting. I love that you brought up Demi because what he did with that film has been so influential with what Wim Wenders did with things like even like Pinot or Buena Vista and what so many other sort of noted filmmakers have done when they've jumped into sort of the documentary form, be it for rock or what have you. It's allowed for that space to really get a little bit more dynamic. Even someone like Spike Lee, like whenever he has gone into documentary space, it hasn't been a standard documentary. It's been exciting and it's been trying to do something different, which I'm so glad TIFF has been able to celebrate that now on the brink of the anniversary with the remaster and the Criterion Blu-ray or the overpriced A24 4K that we're all going to order from the States at some point. But
$90 after shipping.
Exactly.
But when the concert doc is good, it's good. Like you think about Gimme Shelter or Martin Scorsese's The Last Waltz with the late great Rod Robertson. When you either get to hang out with people or experience something that is completely unexpected or just capture a moment in time that is so perfect that afterwards it'll never be the same, it just makes a movie like Stop Making Sense make sense.
Yeah.
And it's such a perfect movie. As much of a naive melody as that might sound. So.
Now, I mean, just to start putting a bow on this, we got to talk a little bit about shorts because it is such an important platform for young filmmakers and upcoming filmmakers, but also for established ones as well. Because, I mean, especially this year, there's people like Jasmine Mostafari, a Canadian filmmaker from Firecrackers a couple of years ago.
Right, okay.
There are actors like Riz Ahmed who are appearing in short films, and I mean, I'm kind of curious. From an audience standpoint, like, people never necessarily give appreciation to the short film form, but now that we're kind of fully in the TikTok era, it almost feels like this is the time for short
Kids
film.
nowadays, they'll love,
like it's time for short film to
if
shine.
you love TikTok, you'll love short. You'll love short.
But I think there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
Like, when you're looking at a short, the narrative structure, it almost plays like a joke, right? You're building to that punchline.
Yeah.
And with the shorts, I think maybe this year and maybe in the future even, attention spans seem to have diminished. We've talked a lot about this on the show where we keep asking
before it's time.
we keep asking, are people okay? Because they're pulling out their phone during the screening and recording on their device. I hope that doesn't happen during the festival, but who knows?
Audiences are always usually pretty well behaved, but who knows now?
Yeah, it just seems like
There's
it's
always going to
such
be a little bit of it, but it's
Yeah.
just one of those things that it's become unfortunately commonplace, whether that's, for better or for worse, but it really does feel like if people want to take a chance, like again, going back to exploration and chance, this is one of those things where there are so many short filmmakers out there who are doing some really interesting and fascinating stuff, and I know Steve and I have had a chance to see a couple of them so far that are trying to push the form to really interesting and different levels, because I mean, again, there are filmmakers out there who can do so much with so very little, and so much of that comes through in the short form.
It's true. I choke a little bit when you compare it to TikTok, but you're absolutely right. It just felt like so
I do
wrong.
too, but I mean,
it hurt to hear that, but there is something about that, because the narrative short form, I think, has sort of come in bloom, no pun intended, over the last few years because of the emphasis on things on social platforms like YouTube and TikTok and all these other things that are just sharing short videos, but are communicating stories in that time in such powerful ways. Again, it's interesting with, like, in some ways you would think, oh, that makes sense, so people are going to be drawn to shortcuts, but it's still one of those programs that it needs more love.
Yeah.
Because people look at it as short films or Taika Waititi.
And
what am I going to
exactly
see?
it, right?
Because it gets dry. But in some ways, you joke about TikTok should sponsor it, but in some ways, I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth, but that's a real platform for some of these films to actually make use of, or should be, not necessarily TikTok, but social media, to show to give short form filmmaking the proper.
Yeah, you almost wish like right after the festival or something that these films would like premiere on TIFF's
that's
YouTube
what I mean.
or something like that. I thought TikTok did do like a film festival with TIFF last year, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, there was
like a mini, like,
something like that.
competition.
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting thing. Like people say it, and I worked for TikTok for a short period of time, but like that next generation of people who are going to make movies, it's interesting they're learning how to shoot and cut things on something like TikTok. So, and you might see that with younger filmmakers in this program. I'm not familiar with a ton of them, but grouping them together, I understand why you do that, but it's hard sometimes, I think, for people when they're looking at their schedule, when you go an hour and a half watching or watching a bunch of short films or seeing a feature, I feel like it's just people's nature to go, well, I want to see this movie. Even for critics like us too,
they want to kind of get their money's worth, right? They want to get that long narrative and have a feature-length film and not necessarily pay for 4 to 5 shorts that are grouped into a section necessarily.
But I do hope that there is, like, I would love to see something like that of like right after maybe you don't want to cannibalize yourself either by going, well, you could just wait and we'll put these online.
It's true.
So,
no, and it's such a hard line to draw, because on one end, you want to put them into a block so people will go and see them, because all cinema, no matter how long or short it is, deserves to be seen properly in the theatrical experience. But at the same time, it's such a great platform for some of these up-and-coming filmmakers that you almost want to see the festival, maybe put them online for the last few days of the festival.
Yeah, or I would love to see them, like, you don't want to make things longer than they already are, because I know it's so convoluted with red carpets, but like being preceded by like a short before a big premiere, I think would be really interesting.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know, that's how you
It does make things longer.
Trojan horse it into people's eyeballs, because you're like, oh, you came to see the Taika Waititi movie, now watch this short that kind of pairs well with it. Like,
which might be better.
Which I would love.
It might be better.
I would love, but some of these shorts are 30, 40 minutes long, right?
It's
so
true.
You can't necessarily do that unless maybe a movie's an hour and a half, but then you have people waiting for half an hour for something they didn't come to see. That guy agrees. I don't know. Yeah, it's I am guilty of not seeing enough shorts at TIFF, and the only time I do is like when a PR person reaches out and goes, I think you'll really like this. Please watch it. And then I usually do, because during the festival, the unfortunate reality sometimes too is like we do a podcast. The podcast has to be sort of broad.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be broad, but if you want the most people to get to listen to
it,
totally, you have to cover Joker when it plays the festival and things like that, and kind of have to go. I have to miss out on this because of that reason. But when there's an actor like Riz Ahmed.
I was just going to say, when Riz Ahmed is there, it gets eyeballs on the program.
Totally.
It's like,
not every short filmmaker can do that.
True.
No,
and
but
he won an Oscar recently for producing a short.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up sort of the 30-40 minute short too, because that transition is into sort of the In Conversation series, which has someone like Pedro Almodovar, and his short who is playing and has this 30-40 minute short with Ethan Hawke and Pedro Pascal. And I mean, are you guys going to try to do any of that stuff? And I mean, I know even Mongrel here in Canada is pushing that short as almost like having a bit of a release, and I think that's kind of.
Are they releasing that theatrically?
It seems to be. I mean, no one seems to be answering what the actual plan is, but I mean, it's in the system, as it were. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I mean, maybe they're going to be putting it at TIFF or pairing it with something else. I mean,
the human voice. I mean, obviously this was during the pandemic as well.
Yeah.
Ended up playing on Crave. In
Yes.
Canada,
Yeah.
So it kind of, and that's the short that he made with Tilda Swinton.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe something like that will happen again. I could see that.
Because I think Movie has it in certain parts of the world,
which would track, right?
Yeah, which again, it may be just jumping onto Movie, which again,
and there's Sony Pictures Classics in the U.S.
Yes, that's right.
Are they the only way you can see it is if you go to the In Conversation?
I do believe so. Yeah.
That's how they get you. It's like a timeshare.
I bet
That's how they get you.
There's also a P&I maybe.
There might be. Yeah.
I actually have it right here. I was thinking, but it doesn't matter. That's still inside baseball for people.
But it is a great program, especially like when you think of someone like Martin Scorsese, who's talked about this, many, many times, that, short films are the chance for filmmakers to really experiment with form and find their voice within the confines or structure of something that is, less or around a half an hour in length, and, nowadays I feel that there is a little bit more clout towards it because you are seeing new generations, interface with technology and creating shorts, but also, again, talking about Scorsese, that Criterion short collection that came out of his.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Like, that's where he came from as a student filmmaker.
Yeah. Now, I mean, obviously, like, on top of that in conversation, there's going to be a bunch of industry stuff, but let's put a bow on sort of all the programs and talking just a few minutes about primetime, because it feels like, to me, this is the first year where primetime feels natural. Because I remember in past years it's be like, oh, there's 3, there's 4. Now it's like they've got 9. And it feels like having television in a film festival is now more commonplace. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, because we are film guys, but at the same time, there has been such a breadth of fantastic storytelling in the TV medium. How do you guys feel about sort of TV finding its place in a big film festival like TIFF?
Do you want to go first, or
Steve? Go ahead.
I don't know. Like, I'm a big TV guy too, and I do think that line is very blurred. And like, good, I hate using this word, but good content is good content.
Right.
And I'm like, a good story is a good story is a better way of putting it. Where I'm like, whether it's, I think when TV lends itself the best, I like when it leans into the episodic nature of television, and I don't love when something just feels like a long movie cut up into 1 hour bits for 9 episodes or 6 episodes. When it comes to it playing TIFF, I've never really cared about primetime.
Yeah.
And that goes for this year as well. Not anything against anything playing in it. They have some big, again in air quotes, stuff. But the only time we've ever gone is to see the couple episodes of Black Mirror. And I think my biggest thing with it is Black Mirror, an anthology series, makes more sense to me to see at a film festival because I'm getting 2 short films.
Right.
Almost.
Yeah. Right.
Where a lot of the stuff that is like 22% of the story, I just find I'm like, I don't know if I need to see that at a film festival. It's like that's the most marketing, the most trailer.
Sure, these 2 episodes of this Korean show I just watched are fantastic.
Yes.
I'm never going to get to see
Where's
the
it
rest.
playing here? Things like that. Like, Netflix has a show from Sean Levy, and there's other things like that. Lulu Wong has a show that's playing, and we love their last film as well. But like, to me, I go, I'd rather just watch this when I'm able to see it, because I see 2 episodes now and I'm waiting months.
Right.
Like, at least in the movie you're seeing the whole thing.
Yeah.
Unless it's Dune Part 1, and then
which isn't even a movie. Let's be real here. It's a prologue.
So anyways, that's my hot take on primetime, I guess. I understand what you're saying, Dave.
Yeah.
It feels like it's a more fully realized, it has more things playing in it this year, but I personally, unless you're showing me a whole mini-series or something like that, an anthology series, like I just sometimes I don't see the point.
You gonna go? Yeah, I'll just quickly say, because I'm agreeing with Matt, so I won't add too much more to it, but it does feel like, the idea of television being more like film and film wanting to be more like television, that novelty is kind of worn off at this point.
Yeah.
And we kind of get the idea where television is more cinematic, it's a novelized approach to things, but there is something about this program where you look at it, it's like, there's a lot of stuff there to discover, and there's some interesting filmmakers who, Lulu Wong, like you just said with the expats, is there, but you're not getting a fully realized experience unless it is an anthology. And so when you're watching it, you're just thinking to yourself, I don't know, I just think that, like, I'd rather watch this director's next movie. You know, like, there are 2...
Or the whole show.
That's... Like, there are 2 series by Nicholas Winding Refn, and I like him as a director, but I haven't watched 1 episode of either show, and it's like, I'm probably never going to watch them. And it's not because of, like, I don't want to, it's I don't have time. And, because I really don't have time. And, like, even for movies, that's such
and
a
you're just a movie guy,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
you will watch a series,
but I will say this, one of the great experiences I had, but it was a truncated thing. It was, and speaking of Marcy Marlene, is Sean Durkin had Southcliffe, which they played that as a film version. And watching that was an amazing experience, and seeing it it was also at Ryerson, changed my way of how I saw like a TV movie could play.
But again, also, that was something that was in like miniseries format because it was like the 2 parts. So I love, like, while I enjoy the idea of them putting prime time, I'm also with you on like, let's put it to those ones that are going to be 2-3 parts. Yeah. Something that's going to be a special event rather than a quote-unquote series.
Yeah, if you want to commit to the 3 hours, then for a mini-series, and sorry, Steve, we keep
it's okay. You guys are pretty much saying what I'm saying anyway.
Please go, yeah.
No, but that, honestly, because I've seen some, I've done a couple of primetime ones, and they're good stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure
There's nothing, like, actually, they're actually great stories, and then they're over.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, but you could, this is a 5-episode series, we're going to show you 2. And it's frustrating as a viewer because it's like, it's almost like just getting teased.
Yeah.
And it's not even like obsessive completionist. You've told me the intro of your story and you've left it there. But the lines have been blurred, as you guys have already said this so well, I don't need to go into it too deeply, but over the last 10 or 15 years, we've really seen those lines change. Television's gotten more money and they've tried to make it, give it a greater sprawl and make it feel like it's something you should see in a cinema. So I don't have a problem with this existing. And like I said, and they show you quality stuff. It's just the presentation of it that drives me mad.
Yeah.
Is this, if it was, like you said, a special presentation of 3 episodes and each one is 48 minutes each and this is a full arc, great. Let's see that.
And you can choose, maybe if they're separate screenings, you see all 3, or you see if you don't care, but give me the option to see the whole story. Right?
No, and I mean, TIFF has done that not during the festival, but I mean, with something like Berlin Alexanderplatz with Fassbinder, and I mean, to have that experience was great. But I mean, I remember last year, I mean, as much of a maniac as he is, I was looking forward to see Von Trier's Kingdom Exodus, and I went to see the first 2 episodes. And no, I have not fired up movie to watch the rest of the damn show yet because I just haven't had the time.
Imagine TIFF had a program called Coming Soon, and they showed you the first act of movies coming out next year or something. I'd be like, no, I'm not doing that. And I know in conversation you get that sometimes where someone will bring, we went to a Disney event the other day where they showed us 20 minutes of a movie. Like, I understand that, but like,
it's a promotional tool.
Yeah, in a film festival, I just, especially because it's TV, I'm like, I'm all for it. I love television. The Bear season 2 and season 1 is like some of my favorite storytelling in anything this year. And there are other years where Bo Burnham's Inside, which is more of a film than a TV show.
Or even Twin Peaks: The Return. Is it film? Is it television?
Right.
Is it David Lynch? Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. It's worth seeing. What it is, who the hell knows?
Yeah.
But
so, anyways, our hot takes on prime time.
Yeah. No.
Cancel prime time.
But I mean, before I put a bow on all of this, I would like to remind everyone that this podcast is sponsored by friends over at Elevation Pictures and their theatrical release of My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3, which is going to be in theaters on Friday, September 8th. If you're not attending TIFF, if you love those movies, as you can watch the family all go to Greece for hijinks and God knows what else. I really don't know what the movie's about, but it's coming out and people are going to love it. So please go complete the trilogy and watch the film. But guys, we've talked about TIFF until we're hoarse, more or less, sitting on this lovely patio above the streets of Toronto. Final thoughts, hopes, dreams. What are you looking forward to? What are you hoping to not have a stroke over? What are you hoping to survive at the end of the day?
It's stuff like this that I'm excited. Like, even though if we started off both, our podcast that we did the other day and this one kind of going like, I don't know if I'm excited, or there's not enough to be excited about. Like, talking to you guys and talking to Eric and on our show and doing we went to an event this morning that highlighted all the
Canadian stuff, absolutely.
I say this, I'm like a broken record at this point every single year, but it is really my favorite time of the year. Like, my year kind of ends and begins at the beginning of September every year because everything's leading to it, and I also feel like it's a start of the fall award season and different things like that too. So I absolutely love it, and I'm very, very excited to eat nothing but M&M peanuts and Cherry Coke Zero and watch a bunch of movies. So I'm stoked. So
no, amen to that. And I mean, at least from my perspective, this almost goes back to what I said about Midnight Madness, where part of the fun is the lineup.
Yeah.
This is not a year where we're desperately trying to get into something.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to lining up with other people.
Going,
so hey, what
like.
did you see?
Yeah, exactly.
What have you liked? You know.
That's how I found
the communal experience.
How to blow up.
Yes. Yeah.
How to Blow Up a Pipeline last year was that movie where I didn't even have it on my radar really, and then I was talking to multiple people in lineups that was like, no, fucking go see it. It's so good. And it ended up being my favorite film of the festival, and we saw it right at the end last year. So stuff like that.
And on a side note, How to Blow Up a Pipeline is available on DVD from our friends here at Elevation Pictures.
So is it?
Go pick it up.
I promise I didn't even do that.
This is corporate propaganda at this point.
But I mean, boys, as always, just thank you for the time. Thank you for getting to do this, because I mean, again, as you know, as much as people think we're all in each other's hip pockets during a festival like this, we really don't get a chance to see each other and talk because we're all going in 14 different directions.
Drinking my favorite coffee from Starbucks.
Yeah, exactly. At like 10:30 in the morning, and
I think maybe one of the other things, just to kind of reiterate, please pay the actors,
pay the actors,
and the writers,
pay the writers.
Let's get the strike over with.
Let's
Studios
get the strike
have too much
over,
money. They're not in poverty. Let's be real. Come on.
Pay the actors, pay the writers. Let's get the strike over with, and also let's remember what the theatrical experience is about. Yeah. Because as much as we all love sitting at home and firing up our Disney Plus or our Netflix or our movie or our TikTok or our YouTube or whatever the hell else it is, there is nothing that trumps the theatrical experience. And I mean, I think that's what a festival like TIFF, at least from my humble perspective, is really all about, because these stories deserve to be told with captive audiences, absorbing them, taking them in, and appreciating them the way they were meant to be seen. But again, guys, thank you for the unique pleasure of sitting down on this beautiful patio, which I'm sure we will be back on several times during the festival as we do interviews or go to various events. But you know what? Enjoy your TIFF, and if you're out there listening, please enjoy yours.
Thanks, man.
Boom.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
I need a key light.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. You can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.